Hello there. What do you say? Sam Kaiser here. And today I'd like to talk about death. I know, pretty somber topic, but I've sort of come to the realization that I obsess over things that don't really matter. And by don't matter, I mean that these are things that I'm not going to be thinking about in a couple of weeks, let alone months, let alone years, right? And yet I think everyone sort of falls into the trap of incessantly thinking about things that aren't going to affect them at all in the long term. A sort of quick heuristic that you can sort of think about is like, imagine you sort of an instance where you've been wronged, or an instance where you failed, or an instance where you've had a setback, and you think to yourself, will this matter in a year's time? Will this matter in 5 years' time? Will this matter in 10 years' time? And if the answer to all those questions is no, then just don't give it that much significance. There's a YouTuber called Benjamin Hart, and he is someone I find very inspirational in a lot of ways, right? He is someone who made a significant amount of money over the course of his life, right? And he ended up getting a divorce from his wife, and he gave a huge proportion of his wealth and his money and his assets to his wife. In fact, he gave significantly more than is usual, right? He, instead of the typical 50-50, he gave 97-3, right? Um, Even in spite of that, his wife still spread malicious rumors about him, saying, awful things about him, things to that effect. And she basically went on this tour, basically saying how she was a single mother, how she was struggling, etc., etc. Even in spite of the fact that she spent a huge amount of money on her lavish lifestyle, and he basically has to just sort of take it and just take it on the chin. And as a result of him not paying, right, the full sum that he owed his wife legally anyway, he went to jail, right, and he had to face the prospect of staying up to a year in jail. Thankfully, he managed to leave due to other reasons, but he had to, for a time at least, really contemplate the idea that he had to stay a year in jail, even in spite of the fact that he went beyond and above what any typical father is expected to do in these sort of like cases. Now, to add insult to injury, right? He during the interim years, right? He and his family, on his view anyway, seemed to have a good relationship. He spent time with them, they spent time with him, etc. Things seems to be going well. But then his daughter makes an extremely viral video, basically lambasting him, saying he was a deadbeat father, saying he wasn't around, etc., etc. Right now, maybe from when she was a child, that might have been like a legitimate point of view, but she's a grown adult at this point, right? Um, the idea that she had like no idea of like the financial situation, no idea of like, about anything, is just kind of appalling, to be honest, right? And the fact that she didn't even bother to get informed is telling in and of itself, right? She she showed an extreme amount of ingratitude and just a general just like contempt for her father, right? And he then went on to try to like sort of rectify like her views, basically like the sort of like views that she was espousing, the argument she was sort of putting forward, and he was basically rebutting them systematically, right? And looking at this whole sort of saga, it kind of put things into perspective for me, to be honest. I have obsessed over the stupidest of things for the longest periods of time, right? And I often feel intense anxiety over the smallest setback. The smallest thing could set me off. The smallest thing can make me think that I'm not, successful, that I'm not worthy, that I'm just not going to be able to win, that I'm not going to be able to achieve my goals, etc., etc., right? But the thing is that you can always start again, right? I'm still relatively young, all things considered, right? I That might not be true for the person listening, but you can always try to change, right? You can always get a little bit better every day. That's all you can do, right? No matter what happens, right? No matter if I pass or not, no matter if I don't know my family decides to I don't know to cut me off or whatever it may be, like I'm still going to do the things I do. I'm still going to put one foot in front of the other. Because what's the alternative? Giving up? I just don't have that sort of constitution. It's just not built in me, I suppose. So yeah, just realize that no matter how bad things are, right, it could always be worse, right? It's trivial and it's sort of a platitude, and yeah, it might seem like a little insensitive, I suppose, in some sense. But the thing to keep in mind is that there's always someone out there who's struggled worse than you, that's been in a worse position than you, that's really, really, really had every single disadvantage stacked against them, and they still make it work. They still try. They still succeed. They still go above and beyond, right? So yeah, Whenever you're thinking about your problems, whenever you're thinking about your situation, just realize there are people out there who make your life seem like Cinderella, like a fairy tale. So yeah, it's short. Life is really, really, really short. Um, it's it's mind numbing to me, like how short it is, to be honest. All things considered, when you think about it. Right now, I'm 22 years old. Um, there's still the part of me that doesn't really accept that. There's still a part of me that sort of thinks of myself as like a little kid, but those days are long gone, right? I'm in my own room. I'm paying my own bills. I haven't lived with my family in nearly a year at this point. Um, I'm not a kid anymore. And my guess is if you're listening to this, you're probably not a kid either. So we need to get rid of that childish belief. The belief that we all have in the back of our minds, the world, that we're immortal, right? That we're invincible, right? Whenever you sort of see other people die, you sort of think that's sad, that's sort of unfortunate, but we don't really think about our own death, right? So just this once, just do me like a favor and just try to think about your death. Not like sort of like incessantly sort of like morbidly like, oh, woe is me and that sort of thing, but just think, okay, just contemplate. There's going to be a point in time where everything is going to be the same except I'm not there. Just think about that for a second and realize that that moment hasn't come yet, but it's going to come someday, at some point that you don't know. It's funny when you look at the calendar, right? If you go far enough into the future, if you go right now, the date is the 12th of May 2024. There's going to be another calendar, another date, another time, and that's going to be the day that you die. But until then, enjoy yourself. This is Sandkaiser signing off.